welcome to our SADD Super Safe Summer Webcast Wednesday. I'm Carrie Ferguson with Colorado SADD State Coordinator, and we are so excited to welcome our new friend, Barbara Petito, today. She works with Amtrak and talking railroad and train safety with us. And I have to say that the state coordinators helping with today's production all learned new and very useful things from Barbara. So I hope you will as well. P.S. As we talk with Barbara today, if you can think of a question that you have for her, please drop it into the chat. And if we have time at the end and it doesn't get answered along the way, we'll answer it after our interview. Or if we don't have time, we'll provide that answer when we post today's video of this interview later on. So now let's welcome Barbara. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for including me. This is really exciting.
Thank you so much for being here. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role at Amtrak and what it is you do?
Sure. I am with the Amtrak Police Department. A lot of people don't know Amtrak has a police department, but we do, and we're about 500 strong. I am a civilian member of the police department, so I'm not a sworn officer, and I do a lot of the communication pieces. I'm a lead communication specialist, and I do a lot of the safety, the railroad safety pieces, the communication pieces, both electronic and print. And I do some counterterrorism information as well. So I'm sort of a little bit of the spokesperson, if you will, for the communications department in the safety and counterterrorism field. So I've been there for 12 years. I love it. And I met my husband there. So how cool is that?
That's very cool.
Wow. Well, Miss Barbara, my name is Dylan, and I'm from Louisiana. I'm the Louisiana SADD State Coordinator. And I must know, if you have to drive across a railroad track, what should drivers know to remain safe?
Dylan, great question, and that's an important one. The very first thing, we have a couple of points on this, but the very first thing is, do not drive across the tracks if you cannot get to the other side safely. A lot of times, and you may see these in your travels, there'll be a traffic light, and people will start queuing behind that traffic light, and they'll be across the tracks. Never, ever find yourself where you are straddled across railroad tracks. That's the very first thing. Only cross when you're absolutely positive you can fit and get over on the other side. The other thing we tell people is to look both ways. Now, there's two kinds of crossings. One's a passive crossing, which means there's no crossbucks or gate or flashing lights or bells. Then there's an active crossing where you have all of those elements. Even though it's an active crossing, we tell people when you approach a railroad crossing, look both ways. Always check to see if there's a train coming, because you don't know if those gates are operating properly or not, or if the bells are working or not. So we always say to look both ways. Another thing that we tell people is, if you have a Waze device, I think everybody on this call must have a Waze device, right? And if you have that Waze device on, when you hit a railroad crossing, you are going to get a warning that says, it's a kind of a sharp sound, and it'll say, grade crossing ahead. So we're telling people, when you hear that light, you get that warning to be prepared to cross over railroad tracks. Too often, folks are just traveling and paying no attention that there's even a railroad coming up, or they're turning onto railroad tracks. So those are just three quick things that, could help people as they're driving over the railroad.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm Michelle, the state coordinator out in Arizona. So if I were to get stuck on the tracks, what do I do? Should I call 911, or how do I handle that?
Excellent question, Michelle. We're telling people, and this is something that is not normal, that you don't hear this. We're telling people that if there's an opportunity, there's no train coming, you are stuck on the tracks, do not call 911 first. Call the emergency notification system number at the crossing. Now, you may not know what that is, but when you, after this call, go to a grade crossing, or when you come upon a grade crossing, look for this sign. It's a rectangular shaped sign. It's blue and white, and there's a toll-free number on there. That toll-free number, when you call it, goes directly to a railroad dispatcher that owns that piece of railroad. That is a live person who's there 24/7, 365. You call that person, you say, I am stuck on the railroad tracks. They say, where are you? You say, I don't know, I'm in the dark. They say, what's the number below the number you just dialed? It's a 7-digit number. And you give them that, that's the locator. They'll say, you're at Market Street. And they'll say, no problem. We're going to stop train traffic altogether because you're stuck out there. Or we're going to put in what's called a slow order. And that tells the engineer of any trains coming to slow down because there is something in the railroad crossing that is blocking their passage through. Now, let's pretend, God forbid, you are stuck on the tracks and a train is coming. You have to just get out. And we tell that to everybody anyway. Get out. You're stuck on the tracks, get out. If a train is coming, you're running, and I'll get into this later in the presentation too. You're running at a 45-degree angle, okay, away from the train tracks, but in the direction of where the train is coming. So you're running toward the train, 45-degree angle. Why? Because if that train comes, hits your car, the debris field could hurt you. So you want to make sure that you're running in that 45-degree angle away from the train. So short answer, call the ENS number. If there's no train traffic coming, there's no bars, nothing's happening, get out of the car first, call the ENS number. If the train is coming, get out of the car. And then at that point, you might as well call 911 because now they've got to come and do a rescue and get your vehicle off the tracks. So a little bit of a twist there because we always think 911 immediately. But if you have the opportunity, there's time, get that ENS number activated, and then you don't have to worry about the train hitting your vehicle.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I think one of the scariest things is to be stuck on a train track. I know that's one of my biggest fears. My name's Kevin. I'm from California. Is there any other important thing to remember if I'm caught between the crossing arms or if my vehicle is disabled on a track?
Absolutely. If you get caught in between the crossing arms, great question, Kevin. We're telling drivers, drive right through. So many people are so afraid to do that because, oh, I'm going to mess up my car, I'm going to dent the bumper, whatever. The gates are meant to break away. So if you're stuck on the tracks, we say drive right through. Don't wait for a train, just drive right through. Or if you can get around, obviously you're going to want to do that. You have to know this, if you're at a active crossing, once the gates start and the bells are going, you have 20 seconds, 20, to get out of there before a train is going to come. So if you're stuck on the tracks, you can't drive through, obviously get out of your vehicle immediately because you don't want to get hurt. So many times our police officers tell us that they hear kids saying, oh, I was afraid to get out. I finally did, but I was like, my father's going to kill me. It's his car. This is all nonsense. You do not want to risk your life by staying inside a vehicle when the train is coming. So you've only got about 20 seconds. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people get their cars stalled on the tracks. They start to turn the engine again. You have no time for that. Get out or drive right through. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Your head.
Hi, Barbara. I'm Joey Burke. I'm the state coordinator for SADD in Wyoming. And one of the things I learned from viewing some of your guys' videos was about the emergency management system. Our notification system, how long has that been in place and how did that come about?
You know, it's really funny because everybody thinks that ENS system has been there forever and ever. It really has not. That has only been out there probably for the last 15 years, 20 years, I think, for the ENS. I'm turning to my husband here, who's a railroader. Is that right?
Sounds right to me.
He says, sounds right to me. Good man. Everyone's doing thumbs up. So it's not brand new. And it came about because of these very things that were happening. People were getting stuck on the railroad tracks. And it's not just regular drivers. It's farmers and farm equipment. It's big tractor trailers. It is those cars and those low boys that get hung up. You've seen that where they're so low, they get trapped on that hump that is the crossing. So because of all of these things, there was the opportunity to come up with some kind of an emergency system so that we could get in touch with the owners of that railroad in the event of a problem. And it's not just a car or a truck that may be the problem. It could be a bunch of kids, let's say, playing in the railroad tracks. You can activate that system, call the number and say, hey, by the way, you got a bunch of kids who are setting up here. Just literally 3 weeks ago in North Carolina, there was a group that was a musical group, and they were shooting a video on the railroad tracks, a music video. The train's coming, they're grabbing their drums and guitars and stuff to get off the track. So if you were to witness that, you could call that ENS number and say, hey, there's a bunch of folks out here that are trespassing on the railroad. So there is that opportunity. But again, for safety purposes and emergency purposes, that number is fantastic to have. And unfortunately, it's not known well enough. And that's the purpose of this and a lot of the other outreach that we do.
So speaking of pedestrians and people around the tracks, what are some important things for people to know about trains and tracks, specifically pedestrians?
Sure. Pedestrians, it's so funny that you use that word, and I like that, Dylan, but in our world, we never call them pedestrians. They're trespassers, which sounds so ominous, but that's really what they are. If you are on railroad property, and by that we mean within 15 feet of the railroad tracks, that whole area, the gates, all of that is railroad property, you are trespassing. And you are subject to the state's trespassing laws. And unfortunately, in some states, that could be jail time, like in DC, where everything is a felony, that would be jail time, right? But probably in Colorado and in these other states where you folks are, it's probably just going to be, it's a misdemeanor and it'll be some kind of fine or community service or something like that. But do know that if you're on the tracks, you are trespassing. I can't say that enough. Also, as a pedestrian, a lot of these kids and folks are wearing earbuds, and a lot of those have those noise cancellation mechanisms inside them. If you have that on, if you have earbuds on, you will not hear a train horn. So many people think, well, I'll hear it, or it's going to come behind me. Or people may think that the train, well, it came this way yesterday, so I'm going to walk this way. Well, tomorrow the train's coming this way. So, or today the train's coming this way. So you don't really have, a clear shot of when a train is coming, should you have those earbuds on and be impaired in that way. So we tell trespassers that not to do that either. We also tell folks that to only cross the tracks at designated areas. If you're out on the right of way, people are using that as shortcuts. Kids are using that as a shortcut to get to school. You should only be crossing the tracks at a designated crossing where it's legal to do so. We're not recommending that anybody out on the right of way just start crossing the tracks willy-nilly to get to the other side, because in fact, you can be cited. We're hoping to get more cameras up in some of these locations where we feel there is a lot of trespassing, and that we're hoping will, enhance our enforcement efforts to make sure that people stop doing that. So you want to be conscious of where you cross. You want to stay off the tracks altogether. And anyone who's out there with earbuds on, it's a recipe for disaster.
Well, thank you, Barbara. You actually answered my question about train tracks and private property. It's good to know for our students that it's considered trespassing for them, and they could get a ticket or worse if they cross train tracks. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hey, Barbara. So I'm Lauren. I'm the New York State coordinator, and I just want to give everybody a little bit of a trigger warning right now. What we're going to talk about might be a little bit disturbing. So Amtrak has been really successful recently in lowering the number of nationwide rates of incidents or crashes involving trains, but we know that there's still work to be done. There's still folks that may attempt suicide on a train track. How are you all dealing with that?
Very good question, Lauren. Right. This is a sensitive issue that even Operation Lifesaver is having difficulty coping with. So your folks know, Operation Lifesaver is a 501c3, which is a charitable organization. They are in every state. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're not in Alaska and they're not in Hawaii. Not a lot of trains in Hawaii, but so they are in about 46, 47 states, and 2 of them don't have OL programs. But they are a group that is dedicated to reducing the number of railroad-related deaths. They look at all of this information. They have a state coordinator in each state. They have volunteers in each state. These volunteers, they go out and they fan out and go to schools and do presentations and that type of thing to get the word out as part of an outreach program. Amtrak works with Operation Lifesaver and along with the other Class 1 railroads, and those are a lot of the freights. I think out in Colorado, Carrie, you'll have BNSF and you'll have Union Pacific out in Colorado. And in your other states, you've seen some of these other freights. I mean, you know when the freight train goes by because it's so long, which is taking up a little bit of another issue as well, because they take so long to go across the tracks because they're miles. I think some of them are way over a mile. People are going around the gates to avoid that long wait. So that's another issue that we have to deal with. But what we are seeing at Amtrak is, and this is a sad thing, we're seeing that Amtrak is becoming the railroad of choice for suicide by train. Suicide by train has gone up in the last 5 years about 10%, and it makes up about a third of all the rail-related deaths. We fear that our railroad is becoming one of choice because, number one, we go faster. And number two, let's face it, we run on a schedule. Give or take an hour on either end. We may be a little late, but we're coming. We're coming. But that's another reason. We run on a schedule. You're not going to stand out there and wait for a freight train to come. It may not come. But you know that the Amtrak train is coming at noon. So you're going to be out there waiting. And this has become such a problem. And in the presentation, I'd love to show you what we are doing to combat suicide specifically. We have a program that is proven incredibly successful. And I'll be honest with you, it's even shocking us. And it's a signage program. We're also working to train some of our on the front line employees to know how to do a suicide intervention. And we just had one not too long ago where a gentleman was out there sitting in the area between the tracks, which is called the gauge. Say it with me. Gauge. You got it. I'm going to ask that at the end. Some gentleman sitting in the gauge, and our guy goes over there and he's chatting him up. What happened? Blah, blah, blah. And it turns out he had that training in the military. So I want to take that training and bring it to a lot of these other frontline folks so that they can be prepared. But we are doing outreach. We are working together with OL and the other Class 1s, and we're putting together a program that I have to tell you, we feel is making some inroads, but it is an uphill struggle. When you hear about these things, I used to be a news reporter. I never covered one of these incidents in my entire career. Not till I came to Amtrak did I realize that any of this ever happened. Trains hit cars. I had no idea that any of this was happening. So definitely, if you're interested in volunteering, because you all don't do enough volunteering, you can work at Operation Lifesaver and be a part of this mission to end a lot of these tragedies, all of which we like to say are pretty much avoidable. So that's kind of where we're headed.
I love that. Thank you so much. And as SADD, you know, that's something that we make sure that we pay a lot of attention to, the mental health of our families and our SADD students and all of our youth across the nation. So just for all of you out there, we will actually be posting on each of our SADD accounts statewide some resources for suicide prevention, some things that you can share with other folks that you may know, so we can help push the message of the importance of mental health and making sure that you seek out the appropriate resources. So thank you, Barbara.
Barbara, I heard that you have some information and resources on railroad safety. Would you like to share that with us now?
Okay, sure. I'm going to go into my PowerPoint and cut me off if I'm going too long here. We're going to definitely show you some videos and we're going to show you some statistics. I have statistics for Colorado, Carrie, and not everybody else. So I'll try and share some of those for you if you would like, but I'll try to keep the numbers to a minimum because it all just blurs and mushes together and it becomes too much. But I'm going to start the presentation now. And this is a presentation, guys, that we give to mostly law enforcement. So some of it is kind of geared a little bit toward the enforcement side, but truly, this is something that's going to benefit anybody who is interested in this topic and trying to stay safe. The anatomy of a great... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to put a disclaimer out there for our viewers that you are going to be showing some train and car crashes, correct?
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I'll get to them. I can give you the heads up as soon as you're about to see them, if you like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
No, not a problem. And just so we're clear, this is a presentation that's not, there are some elements in here that Operation Lifesaver uses, but this is a presentation that is proprietary to Amtrak. So this is not what you would see in a normal Operation Lifesaver presentation. I'm going to start with the number of crossings, and this is nationally, which people are amazed when they hear that there's nearly 250,000 grade crossings in the country. That is a lot of crossings. And if I could shut them all down, every one of them, I would. But unfortunately, you know, this is not something that can be done and really can be done inexpensively, because it is quite a production. In Colorado, Carrie, this is just for you. There's 1,759 crossings in Colorado, which sounds like a whole lot as well. And most of those are active crossings. There are a few passive, and I'm going to talk about that one incident at a passive crossing later on in the presentation. This is the rail-related fatalities in 2019. When you see 2019, that is because we get our statistics from the Federal Railroad Administration. They govern what all the railroads do, and they are several months behind. So, and I think you folks at SADD have that same incident as well, where you're a little bit behind in your stats, but it's not so far behind that this becomes irrelevant. But what you're seeing here is probably the most up-to-date information that we can offer right now. Trespassing is 67% of all the railroad-related deaths. That's why this presentation is geared a little bit more toward trespassing, because that makes up most of the deaths. If you take a peek here, these are the top 15 states for trespassing, excuse me, for grade crossing collisions. And these, you got to be fair, Texas and California is typically 1 and 2, always. And to be fair, that's because they have a lot more railroad than the other states. So they have a little bit more real estate than some of the others. So those two are typically 1 and 2. For Colorado, Colorado is not up there, obviously, 1 through 15, but it ranks 29th in the nation for grade crossing collisions. Not horrible, but not great. Here we have highway users, public grade crossing collisions. This is interesting. Everybody says, well, it's always the big bad tractor trailers that are killing everybody, and they're out there causing all these problems. It's not. It's your regular auto. It's your regular vehicle that you and I drive that makes up most of the public crossing collisions in the United States. The best worst number up there is what? And that would be school bus, right? 2 incidents involving school buses. And if anybody ever knows an engineer, a railroad engineer, he or she will tell you that their biggest fear when they're out there on the tracks is, God forbid, to see a school bus trapped at a crossing or starting to cut out in front of the train. Same would go for a log truck, or, as you could imagine, a fuel truck, something along those lines. Public crossing motorist actions. Everybody says, well, what is the driver doing when they're getting into these accidents with trains? And everybody says, oh, they're going around the gate. Everybody's going around the gate. And actually, when you look at the statistics, that is not the case. The number one activity that a driver is doing when it's getting hit by a train is not stopping at a crossing, or stopping at a crossing and then continuing to move forward. So those are the folks that are getting hit, the do not stop folks. It seems so hard to believe. How do you not stop? But it is happening, and it's happening at a greater number than most will think about. What I have about, what I'm about to show you right now, and this is the first disclaimer, this is a little bit graphic. What I'm about to show you here is an example of did not stop. This just happened this past July in North Carolina. I had never had any video like this to show people. When I say do not stop, nobody really understands what that means. And now I do. I'm going to play this video. There is no audio. And I want you to watch at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Can you see the lights activating with the crossings right there? Okay, you see the cross buck going down. And like we said, so it's what, 20 to 30 seconds before the train is on top of that crossing. I want you to stay focused on that crossing right now, because this is where you're going to see the example that we were talking about of do not stop. And this was shot from a store across the street from this crossing. You'll see it twice. It's going to come at you twice. Okay, I think that was all right. When you look at that video, you have to say to yourself, what was that person doing? That person didn't see. Now the gate goes back up. That person didn't see the gate? How could that happen? Now see the person right there? They saw what happened, so he hesitated and looked a little bit both ways. And there's actually another train coming at this point too. The gate's going back down, but obviously no one there is getting involved in any of that activity where they're getting hit. So as horrifying as all of that is the number one way that people are getting killed. It looked as though the car was under the tracks there, but it was actually pushed so far down the tracks that it would probably take about a mile before that engineer could stop his locomotive. And that's going at about 55 miles an hour. The train was going a little quicker than that. So it's about 18 football fields before a train can stop. And that a lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, well, he or she sees me, so they can stop the train. But it takes actually that long for it to stop. This is a piece that we made, emergency notification system. This is a piece that we made after actually a friend of ours, me and Dave, he was the engineer in this video. You'll see him. This was a piece that we made to outline what the emergency notification is and how you can activate it. And I believe, Carrie, at the end of our presentation, you will have a link to this video to show on your own.
Train car northbound is on fire. We have multiple injuries.
600,000-ton train that could be barreling down and hitting you.
We hit a big truck. We're off ground. It's a horrifying experience. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh!
Hundreds of people are killed at crossings every year, and these are completely preventable. One of the ways we can prevent these accidents is for the public to do their job. The emergency notification system provides motorists or pedestrians with a phone number that they can call, and then we'll be able to stop train traffic that's heading in that direction. It's the first phone call you want to make if there's anything happening in a crossing. You want to stop any oncoming train.
Every grade crossing is protected with an emergency notification sign. What that provides is an emergency notification phone number that the passenger or the motorist can immediately notify the railroad of any emergency at that crossing. The locator crossing number, which is 6 digits and a letter, can effectively tell the train dispatcher exactly where they are. When you call that number, you're talking to the train dispatcher that's specifically associated with that railroad.
You'll get a response right away because the train dispatcher picks up and he's going to ask, what location are you at? You give him that DOT number. Just stay clear of the tracks. Let the dispatcher handle everything from that point on. Once you get that call in, for me to contact the locomotive engineer on the train, it can be 5-10 seconds. I'm going to get him on the radio immediately to bring your train to a safe stop. We have an emergency situation ahead. Calling 911 is not going to stop the train from coming. The first responder is your train dispatcher in this case. That 800 number is going to get you right to the first responder.
Unfortunately, far too often people get complacent around railroad tracks.
that's really a recipe for harm or disaster.
If you're towing a vehicle, if you're a fire engine responding to an emergency situation, you still need to let the railroad know that you're in that space, that you are close to the tracks or you're on the tracks.
The ENS sign can be located in many places, either on the crossbuck, directly at the crossing, or on the silver box, which is usually located adjacent to the crossing. So you should call it if you suspect that the gates are malfunctioning, if you see a vehicle that's stuck on the tracks, if you see any suspicious activity, if you see something that looks out of place, or an object that's obstructing the tracks. As soon as your vehicle is stuck on the tracks, if you see the train approaching the crossing, you need to get away from that vehicle as soon as possible and run at a 45-degree angle towards the train. Far too many times we see people trying to save their vehicles, and the unfortunate reality is when they're trying to save their vehicles, in many cases they lose their life.
And these incidents also have a profound impact on locomotive engineers, because that individual may have long-term effects from this incident that affect them professionally and personally.
Stop! It's not going to stop!
If something happens and you are stuck on the grade crossing, the first thing you want to do is get your car off. So just drive through the gate. The gates are meant to break away, and so you will be able to get to the other side. You never want to be stuck at a crossing. So don't try to get over the crossing until you know you can get to the other side. Don't be stuck in traffic and sitting on a grade crossing, on a railroad crossing, in the path of a train.
We got one possibly trapped in the train. Possibly alive. I got a DOA in the train as well.
It's a horrifying experience. We've had careers that have been ended as a result of these incidents.
Every one of these accidents breaks our heart, and we need to do everything we possibly can to keep people off those crossings and away from trains.
A lot of folks look at active grade crossings where you have gates and arms as an inconvenience and an annoyance. Those arms are not there to prevent you from being where you want to be, but to help you get there safely.
This is a piece that we have used as part of our outreach campaign for a lot of different organizations, a lot of different driving classes, driver's ed schools, trucking companies, et cetera. So this is a piece that has been pretty effective in getting the word out about the ENS. This is a little bit more on trespassing, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because I know we're pressed a little bit for time. But you can see where the trespassing numbers have gone from, starting even back into 2004 and coming into 2019. 2020, we're sort of headed in the same direction, getting very close to 900. So this year we may see a little bit less, or at least we're hoping we do. And that's casualties. Casualties are obviously deaths and injuries as well. Top 10 states for trespassing are there. And again, you've got Texas and California. We said why. That's kind of rigged a little bit. But for Colorado, 18th. Colorado's ranked 18th in the nation for trespassing casualties. So that's a little bit more significant than the grade crossing numbers. Fatalities by age. This is interesting. Everybody says, what's these young kids? It's these Teenagers, they're the ones that are doing all of this craziness on the railroad. Actually, it's not the case. It's the age group between 36 and 40 that represent the largest number of trespassers on the railroad that are either getting killed or injured. So that was sort of an interesting number. Then you see that number, again, spike up a little bit, 41 to 45. And 26 to 30 also high numbers as well. So it's not the what you think about the young kids that are the culprits, it's actually more of the adults. Trespassing casualties by month, I thought this was interesting. August is the biggest month, and the FRA tells us that that's because it's the summer. More people are out. Some people are on vacation. They're traveling into areas that they don't really know that well. And that's the reason why more folks may be wandering out on the tracks. Here's where we start to see a little more of the suicide implications when you start to look at the activity. People that are standing on the tracks, laying on the tracks, sitting on the tracks, they tend to be folks who are intentionally trying to take their lives. But then you see the walking and hit by equipment, and that's a big, big number too. And unfortunately, those are the folks, like we said, that are maybe wearing the earbuds. They think because they're walking in the gauge, that space between the tracks, the gauge, they think if they're walking in there, they're going to feel a vibration when a train comes, and you do not. These are the suicide numbers. We're predicting, I guess, that about 270 people each year take their life. Suicide by train, that's what the FRA is telling us at least. And they've only been, recording these numbers since 2011, but it looks like it's a decline here in 2019, which is great news, but then a little bit of a spike in for 2020. If you look to the right of your screen, I hope you can see that it's a suicide hotline sign. This is a program that Amtrak created, and we're putting the, they're not seeing that is what you're telling me. Okay, you may not be able to see that. That's going to be the next slide. There you go. Sorry about that. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a sign that we have placed out on the right-of-way on our tracks. But on the tracks we don't own, we're asking the host railroads to, hey, put these signs out there. We're seeing a tremendous response with these materials out there. The Volpe folks in Massachusetts, they're a think tank. They've studied this issue a lot. And they're telling us that there are some people who will respond to this type of signage. So even if we get one person who responds to it, we see that as a definite win. Now, if you look at this and I said to you, who's trespassing in this photo, I'm hoping your answer would be everyone, because everybody in this photo is trespassing. This is the uphill battle that we face. What you can't see is this really pretty bridge on the other side of these tracks, and that's what everybody is photographing. But the people standing inside the yellow, they're trespassing. Obviously, the two people in the gauge and the other folks on the other side also trespassing. This was something that we found amazing. This was in Illinois. It was a 5K, and apparently it got flooded out in a certain area, and the runners just took some liberties on their own and decided they were going to do a shortcut. This is a live train, what you see here on the left, and that's the engineer, and he's yelling at them. He's not saying good words. And he's pretty upset. All of these people, this is something, a phenomenon that we find very surprising, and that is the people who would go out on the railroad tracks. I don't know if you ladies on the call, if you'd be out there in your white dress, I don't think so. But we're seeing a lot of this. We contact these photographers when we find these pictures, and we ask them to take this down because they are, in fact, breaking the law. This was gone for a while, and as you can see, the date there is January something, the 2014. It's coming back now. More people are doing this now for Save the Date. Again, these people standing on the rails are trespassing. The next one I think may shock some of you. This was one that we found, and when we contacted this photographer, she said she had no idea that this was illegal, that her client wanted to do this. And in fact, we had to dissuade her ever again from doing this. But you see that little boy is standing on what looks like a really shiny rail. And that means that that rail is in use, that is not a dead track, that's in fact an active railroad. These are other pictures that we have found on the internet as well with people trespassing. We even had somebody send a photo, not these, but like this, to Amtrak as part of their resume, to show the folks at Amtrak how much of a rail enthusiast they were, and I guarantee you they did not get the job. Neutral lead wire, this is something that is very scary. This is when you start to get into some serious problems on our railroad, because this controls a lot of the elements that tell trains where to go and how to go and that kind of thing. So neutral lead wire, when it is stolen, it becomes a very big obstacle for us, because it in fact relates to the controlling of trains. They are taking this wire. This is copper wire. If you're in the areas where there's catenary, which is electric power, it is run by some of this copper wire, and folks are stealing this to take it to a salvage shop so they can get money. I think it's $3.45 or something per pound for copper wire. When we see these people on the railroad, we don't know, are they evildoers? Are they trying to sabotage the railroad? We don't know. Or are they just stealing the copper wire? So that is another issue there that we have to try to overcome. Here is one other trespassing video, and I show this because this could never ever happen, I think, again in life. These were two trains, Train 79 and Train 80, that were passing each other. Some kids thought it would be fun to put a railroad tie on the tracks. Well, when the northbound train hit it, the tie went up into the southbound train's engineer window. Had this window not done what it is supposed to do, which is absorb the
Everybody.
I always put this in for fun, only because when I show this to police, I say, what's wrong here? Granted, this happened in Germany, so let's be fair, but they're doing what they know to do, the fire department, and what they're doing is protecting their hose, not realizing that it has no impact whatsoever, obviously, with the train. So we tell people, you can't really do what you're always taught to do. You got to make a little adjustment when it comes to the railroad. So those are, these are some apps that are available. If anybody has further interest, they tell you where all the different tracks and grade crossings are. This is the laws of state grade crossing laws, which is fantastic if you want to know, if you're a cop, if you want to know, or anyone else, what the penalties are for trespassing or going around the gates, etc. This is a video we're not going to have time to play today, but you will have a link to this piece. And this is a fantastic piece. This is one of the first videos that I made at Amtrak, and it really tells the story based on real life stories of how dangerous and how unforgiving the railroad can be. So that's what I have to present to you folks. I don't know if you have any other questions for me. We can probably take that down now and bring you all back up. If oh, there you go. Oh, very well. Oh, you're all still there. Good. You didn't go get a sandwich and leave. Okay, do you have any other questions? Do you have any
Barbara,
thoughts? You have
thank you so much.
Tell us.
I didn't find any questions in the chat. I did have one. Is the Waze, is that an app for your phone?
Okay.
The Waze alert system?
Good question. The Waze is, you know, it's a navigational system. You all have had it. It's an app on your phone, and it provides a navigational, you know, system for your car when you want to find directions. You'll put it in. The pieces of equipment that have been added to this now is all of the crossings are being populated in to this app. And what it'll do is when you get close to a railroad crossing, you'll get an alert, which is an audio, and then you'll get a visual that says grade crossing ahead. If you saw in that one video that we showed where the person turned onto the tracks, that happens routinely. And this app will tell you, this element of Waze will tell you, hey, there's a train crossing coming, so that you know to look for it. And it's being really, I don't think it's everywhere yet. They haven't populated every crossing in yet, 250,000 of them, but they're certainly on their way. So look for that and listen to it. It's an odd sound. It's like a siren sound.
Okay.
Carrie, did
Awesome.
you see the question in the chat there?
Sorry. Oh, wait.
Question in the chat.
Oh. Lynn, oh, sorry. Lila asks, where is Amtrak based out of?
Amtrak,
Sure.
sure. Amtrak's headquarters is in Washington, D.C., 1 Massachusetts Avenue, right smack in the middle of Washington, D.C. And then there are offices all over the country. The biggest hubs we're in would be New York, Chicago, LA, we're in California, we're in Texas, we're New Jersey. So we have a lot of different stations there, but DC is the headquarters.
Thank you. Lynn also commented that this was really interesting information. And Lynn, this is the same thing that we all found. We didn't know about the phone number associated, the ENS warning system either. So that's why that was kind of the whole idea that started this whole presentation today. So thank you. I'm glad you learned something. Barbara, this is really important and extremely helpful information. Also, Barbara has provided some wonderful resources for us to share in the form of some pocket safety cards and fact sheets. And she also mentioned that there could be stickers and other cool train swag. So if you're interested in any of these resources, go ahead and contact your state coordinator and we'll be happy to set you up. And once again, thank you so much to Barbara Petito, the lead communication specialist with the Amtrak Police Department, for being with us and teaching us today. We appreciate you so much. And also look for this recording. You're welcome. Thank you. So look for the recording of this video to be posted on all of the state social media outlets today. And thank you all for joining us. And tune in next week for some mountain and rural driving tips. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. Bye-bye, everyone.